Mhm. All right. Boop, 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 boop. Yo, how we doing? Great to see you all. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Monday. You guys see the Super Bowl yesterday? You watched that? Drop your college recruiting questions down below. Going to get to as many of them as we possibly can. We're back here at the 1 p.m. Eastern time today. Hope you guys had a wonderful weekend. Drop your college recruiting questions down below. Going to get to as many of them as we possibly can. Yeah, hope you guys had a wonderful weekend. Hope you guys enjoyed the Super Bowl. Got to spend some time with family, ate some good food, all those wonderful things. Hope all that happened. Drop your college recruiting questions down below as usual. Going to get to as many of them as we possibly can. For those of you who have been here before, great to see you again. Ilyas, yo, good to see you. Jax, good to see you. What's up? We good? I'm glad. I'm glad you're good. I'm glad. All right, let's go. What are some good questions to ask a coach on a call for soccer? Cool, Henry. So here's how I think about this, okay? So we have different layers of questions. There's not just like, here's 3 of them, right? So you have different layers depending on how long you've been talking to the coach, because you're going to talk to a coach differently if it's the first call than if it's the 5th call, right? You're not going to talk to those coaches the same. So the first thing is you're going to ask what we call tier 1 questions. Tier 1 questions would be questions like this, okay? It'd be a question like, oh, hold on. Okay, here we go. It would be a question like, if you're talking to the assistant coach, what's it like to play for the head coach? Okay, what's that coach like? Second question, what's the culture of the program like? Okay, ask about the culture. Third question could be, what's your recruiting timeline for this specific grad class or position? And then the fourth question would be something like, how can I make this process easier on you? What do you need from me? Okay, those would be like the 4 basic questions that if you just start out with those, you're going to be in good shape. Okay. Now, as you get deeper into the process, like I said, you're going to treat conversations with coaches differently. And this is one of the things that I think a lot of people mess up in recruiting, which is that they just treat all schools the same, right? Now, in the beginning, that's actually okay. You could do that when you're just trying to drum up interest in the beginning. You can 100% do that, and you're going to be fine. But as you get deeper into the process, and some of those schools you're still just emailing or DMing with. Some of them you're having phone calls or text with. Some of them you've actually visited and been on campus. Some of them you have offers with. Some of them you've been talking to for 1 month, and some you've been talking to for 8 months. You're going to tailor your communication to each of those schools. You shouldn't be using the same communication, right? And that's a big thing is people do this with video too. They do it with evidence. They create one video and then they just keep sending that to college coaches, and that's it. But over time, the coaches who are recruiting you are going to want to evaluate different things, right? That what a coach evaluates when they first start recruiting you is different than what they evaluate at the end. And so your communication with the coach is going to transform over the whole time that you're with a college coach, that you're getting recruited by them. And so keep in mind, I just gave you those questions, but those questions, that's just for the first conversation. You should be changing the way that you communicate with coaches over a long period of time. Rob, good to see you, sir. Glad you're here. Great Monday. I agree. It is a great Monday. How hard is it to get a D1 scholarship, Jamie asks? That's a good question. It's hard. It's hard, but it's totally possible. Even in a transfer portal world, don't let anybody tell you that high school athletes are not getting Division I scholarships anymore, because that's not true. It's not true. High school athletes are absolutely getting Division I scholarships still. So here's how I think about how hard it is to get recruited, to get a D1 scholarship, all those things. Here's how I think about this. The first thing is it's definitely harder than it used to be. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you have the transfer portal, you have NIL, you have more travel and club teams than ever before, if that's a thing in your sport, right? And so like it's harder than ever to get recruited. That said, not only are athletes still getting recruited, they're getting more scholarship money than ever before. And often they're even getting like NIL rev share deals on top of scholarship money. Okay. So it's a great time to be a high school recruit. And anybody that tells you that it's not probably just doesn't know that much about recruiting or isn't that good at recruiting, right? Now, is it harder than ever? Yes. Okay. The reason for this is the transfer portal. College coaches view college players as less risky than a high school kid. College players are bigger, faster, stronger. They're older. They've played against collegiate competition. They've been away from home before. All of those things make a collegiate recruit less risky than a high school kid. A high school kid, not as physically developed, isn't going to step on campus for a couple years, has never been away from home before, has never played against collegiate competition. That is a riskier investment for a college coach, which is why a lot of coaches will prefer to recruit out of the portal first, and they'll go get college kids first. And then whatever they don't get out of the portal, they'll then go get from high school athletes. Okay. So what happens is that means there are less Division I spots than ever before, because a lot of those are going to transfer portal kids. So players who would have gone D1 in past years, what's happening to those players now? Well, they're going to D2 schools, right? Or D3 schools. And you have this trickle-down effect where the talent level is rising at all levels because of the trickle-down, because of what's happening at the transfer portal and the top level. So yes, it's harder for a high school athlete to go D1 than ever before. The rewards are also better than ever. And high school athletes are still doing this. They're still doing this. But you have to be really talented. You do. Now, even if you don't go D1, that doesn't mean it's not worth it. There are enormous scholarships available at lower level schools. D2 schools, D3, NAIAs. Like, there's a ton of money down there. And if you hit me with, well, D3 schools can't give athletic scholarships, the first thing I'd say is, okay, there's enormous academic money there. And the second thing I'd say is, are you sure about the academic and athletic scholarship thing? And the reason I say that is because we've had kids get academic money to a school that they couldn't get into. Think about that for a second. A kid doesn't have the grades to get into a school. Not only does the kid get in, but the kid gets academic money. How does that happen? It's an athletic scholarship disguised as academic money. That's what's happening. Okay. So can they legally give an athletic scholarship? No. Can they find ways to get creative to get kids money? Yeah, 100%. So some of the biggest scholarships that we've seen have been to D3 schools. Okay. So there is an enormous amount. If you're sort of like new to recruiting and you just don't know that much about it, there's an enormous amount of scholarship money outside of the Division I level, like a crazy amount. Okay. So keep that in mind. But yeah, it's harder to get a D1 scholarship. I mean, you're competing against the best of the best. Hey, bro. Hey, what's up? What to do to try to get one spot, D1 or D2? We could talk for a long time about that kind of stuff, right? It's a general question. If you can make the question more specific, I can give you a better answer. But the reality is that you need three things: talent, evidence, and exposure. You need to be good enough to play in college. You need proof that you're good enough to play in college. And you need a lot of coaches to see that proof. As long as you have those three things, you're going to get recruited. If you have less interest and less offers than you want, it means you're missing one or more of those things. Okay. Can you elaborate on the 10-7 rule? I'm not going to go super specific into it, but it has to do with the classes that you need in order to play at the next level. So you basically need a certain number of core classes in order to play at the next level. But most kids have that anyway. Good morning. Good morning. It's great to see you. Great to see you. Best email tip. Okay, let me think. The best one. When I think of best, I think of what is the one tip that if you did this and got everything else wrong, you could still potentially get interest from college coaches. That's how I'm viewing best. Okay. Let me think about that. It's not the script. It's definitely not the script. Could be the video, like the evidence that you share. If you get everything else wrong, but you get the evidence right, probably do okay. So that's pretty high on my list. Another thing that's very high on my list is high volume, meaning sending a lot of them, sending to a lot of coaches and sending a lot of messages to each coach. That would also be very high. But the thing I'm thinking about is if you send a bunch of them, but the evidence isn't good, are you going to get any responses? Maybe if you go wide enough, you'll get lucky. But my best email tip in this case is actually probably not even related to email. My best email tip to you is your evidence better be on point. If you took your kids' best clips and just threw them into a highlight video and sent that to college coaches, you're probably going to have a hard time getting responses. Like, you have to be so much more deliberate and specific about why a college coach should recruit your kid. So email, my best email tips, it's not around subject lines. It's not around scripts. It's not around contact info, maybe follow-ups and quantity. But honestly, I think you could get everything wrong in email. But if you get evidence right, you're giving yourself a fighting chance. And if you get evidence wrong, basically nothing else in the message matters, which is why, like for us, we spend an outrageous amount of time making sure that the evidence is dialed in before we ever press send. Like if you had boxes, or if you had like a graph, like a line of how much time and effort we spend on each part of the email process, it would look like this. I have this right next to me here. Let's see this. Okay. This would be like script, subject line, let's make this list that's a little bigger. And then all of this is evidence. Looks like this. You see this? I don't know if you guys can see this or not. All right. This is what this looks like. Where are we? Here. So if this was everything that's required to get email responses, this would be like the script, important but not critical, subject line, important but not critical, right? Then we have the list of schools. You can notice this is a little bit bigger, right? The schools you contact and the number you contact, pretty important. Notice how big this is, though. This is all evidence. All of that is evidence. In terms of how critical it is to get email responses from coaches, this is what matters. If you get this right, this stuff is not nearly as important. Does this stuff still matter? Yeah. If you have this and you have these, now you're cooking with peanut oil. Now you're in good shape, right? So my best email tip, ironically, has nothing to do with email, really. It's about the evidence that you do before you ever actually send an email. That's what's going to make the biggest difference for you. And that's what most people miss. Because what do you see on social media, guys? What does everybody say? You want email responses, right? Here's my advice to you. Use this script. Use this subject line. Make sure you personalize it. Like, this is what people are saying. But I'm telling you, we've sent hundreds of thousands, actually probably over 1 million emails to college coaches. Evidence is what matters. That's my best email tip. I'll do one. Awesome. I love it. What you got? Coach asked for my son's spring baseball schedule. Aren't too busy with their college schedule? Maybe, maybe not. But there's a couple of things. One is, if they're asking for it, you don't got to ask why, just roll with it, take it. But the other thing is, they might be too busy with their college schedule. It's true that coaches will recruit less in person during season than outside of season. That's for sure true, especially you play baseball. So like summer is going to be the big recruiting time, right? You probably already know that. But that doesn't mean that during high school season, they're not doing a couple things. One is, if they can get out to watch a kid, they still will, right? They still will. It just happens far less often. The second thing is, it doesn't mean they're not watching the player, right? They're still seeing what's happening. They're seeing the strength of competition in your schedule. They're evaluating your kid. Like, that's all still happening. So that could be why they're also asking for that. But I wouldn't make the assumption that they're not going to watch your kid if they're asking for the schedule, right? And so they will recruit in season. They just recruit less in season than outside of season, if that makes sense. Jamie says, what's the best way to email a college coach? So we kind of just went over a best email tip. And again, I would say, if you focus on the evidence, then nothing else is nearly as important. Now, by the way, make sure you hear this, guys. The script is important. The subject line is important. The list is important. The sequencing is important. Like, all of that is really important, of course. But I'm just saying, like, the most important thing is probably evidence. Because again, I think about the best tip as, if I got this one thing right, what makes everything else irrelevant or not as important? And evidence is that thing. Evidence is that thing for sure. And so a couple things I'd say. One, pull out your phone, write your script, pull out your phone, timer. You're going to open your timer app just like this. Boom, clock. Going to look like this. And then you're going to pull up your email script that you've written to a college coach. You're going to press start, and you're going to start reading it. And if it takes you longer than 30 seconds, the message is too long. Message is too long. Okay. That's the first thing that I would do. Second thing is make sure that the evidence is dialed in. Third thing is I'd make sure to contact at least 100 schools. Fourth thing is I'd make sure to contact at least multiple coaches at each of those schools. And the fifth thing is I'd contact each of those coaches multiple times. If you do those 5 things, you're probably in really good shape. A D1 college asked for my son's spring schedule. Is this promising, and aren't they busy with their own schedule? I think, did I answer this already? Yeah. Yeah, it's promising. They're not going to ask for a schedule of a kid that they don't see any potential in recruiting. It's the same thing with like a follow on social media. It's the same thing. People will say, "Oh, a coach followed my kid on social media. Does that mean anything?" And here, the response that I usually give is, "Why would a college coach go follow a kid if they thought they were terrible?" And the answer is like they don't, right? They're not going to go follow kids that they think suck. They're only following kids that they see some sort of potential that maybe they could recruit them one day. Now, is that the highest level of interest? No, absolutely not. In fact, it's on the bottom rung, right? But it doesn't mean it's not nothing. And so, yeah, I would say that that's promising. By the way, as we talk about social media workshop is tomorrow. And so like registration closes tomorrow afternoon. So if you're interested in social media workshop, this is like the last chance. We've been talking about this for probably like 10 days now. So if you want to know everything that we're doing on social media, what's working, and just apply it, if the recruiting process or specifically social media feels like a foreign language to you, d1scholarship.com/social media workshop. We'll be on tomorrow night. It's going to be awesome. Last chance to get tickets. Registration closes tomorrow afternoon, and then we won't be doing social media for a while again. Should I take a visit for golf or wait until it's fall? Typically, you want to take the visit sooner rather than later. Why? Because they can just get rid of the visit. They can just pull that visit, and then it becomes very difficult, right? So you want to strike while the iron is hot. So if you're open to taking a visit because you like the school, maybe it's not that far from you, there are a lot of reasons why you should consider taking a visit, even if a school isn't at the top of your list. But what I would say is take that visit sooner rather than later, because the further that you push that thing out, the less likely that visit is to actually happen. If you wait until the fall is 8 months away, man. The fall is 8 months away. There's no telling that coach is still going to be interested then. So take the visit while you can. Don't assume that just because you have interest now means you're going to have interest later. We see this happen too with offers. People who have like talented athletes who early in their recruiting process get 10, 15, 20 offers, right? You think, okay, like these schools are just going to be around, And then what happens is they wait and they wait and they wait. And then when they come back to say like, okay, now we're ready to commit or visit one of these schools or really dive into them, at that point, the offers are no longer committable and the college coaches bounce. And so don't take for granted the interest that you have now. If you have a chance to get on a phone call, make it happen now. A chance to go on a visit, make it happen now. A chance to take an offer that you want to take it now, because there's no guarantee that it's going to be there tomorrow, especially in today's recruiting world. Sons of freshman and sophomore football season. Oh, freshman and sophomore football seasons were derailed due to injury. He's a rising junior, 2028. Are we screwed? He's healthy now. No, you're not screwed. You're not screwed at all. Freshman and sophomore year are really not that important. Unless he's a top 1% athlete, in which case, here's how you know, by the way, if your kid is a top 1% athlete. Are they on all the national rankings lists? Do they play for a top 10 or 20 in the country high school travel or club team? Are they getting media articles written about them every month? If that's not happening, your kid is not a top 1% athlete. That doesn't mean they can't get recruited. Doesn't mean they can't go D1. Doesn't mean they can't get a 6-figure scholarship. All that stuff can still happen. It just means you're not going to be able to rely on talent alone. College coaches are not going to discover them, right? You're going to have to put work in to make that happen. But unless your kid is a top 1% athlete, freshman and sophomore year are not nearly as important. Now, some sports, that's not the case. You play football, so for you, that is the case. But for something like lacrosse, sophomore year is going to be more important because by the time you get to junior year, right, you're already at September 1 and lacrosse recruits aggressively early. So, but for you, you're definitely not screwed. You're definitely not screwed. He's healthy now. You got junior season coming up. Put it this way. Let me put it this way. We got kids and families who are 2026s who came to us at the beginning of senior year and got Division I offers. Hopefully that answers your question. When should I start to email college coaches? So we typically say that freshman year is when you should start to flex the muscle. Now, let me be clear. Freshman year, you're not sending a bunch of emails because you're going to get offers. It's not going to happen. So, Jack, why would we do stuff freshman year? So you can do what we call flexing the muscle. Listen, when you get into like the latter half of sophomore year and then into junior and senior year, you're going to need to ramp. You're going to need to do a lot. Contacts a lot of schools, make a lot of videos, post a lot of content on social media, have a lot of phone calls, go to a lot of showcases and camps. The point is a lot, right? If you haven't done any of that stuff by the time that you get to second half of sophomore year and then into junior year, it's going to be very difficult to go from not doing anything to all of a sudden doing a ton of that stuff, right? That's going to be very difficult. So what I would say is rather than doing that, freshman year, start to flex the muscle. Now, you don't have to go, when I say flex the muscle, I mean start to do some of the things that you're going to need to do a lot of later on. You don't need to go contact 100 schools, but freshman year, I'd send 10 or 20 emails just for the heck of it, just to see what that feels like. Make some highlight videos, post a few times on social media. Again, not because you're going to get recruited freshman year, but because you don't want the first time that you do those things to be when you have to go send 100 of them, right? And so that's what we call flexing the muscles freshman year. Sophomore year is building the foundation. You're doing some of the work ahead of time so that when it's time to ramp, you don't get super overwhelmed and stressed. And so again, sophomore year, like right now, if you're 2028, it's like, well, when should I start doing stuff? The answer is yesterday. Like you should be doing stuff now. And the reason is not because you're going to get an offer in the next 3 months. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is in 6 months, you're going to need to be contacting, unless your kid is a top 1% athlete, you're going to need to be contacting 100 plus schools, multiple coaches at each school, multiple times on multiple platforms, dozens of videos. Like there's a lot of work and stuff that's going to have to go into that if you really want to maximize opportunities. And so that will be easier for you if you build that foundation for that now. You start getting evidence, you start putting together videos, you start gathering metrics and stats, you start putting together a target list of schools, start doing some of that stuff now so that when you're going to ramp in a few months, you can just work on ramping rather than having to build the foundation and ramp in the same time. Does that make sense? So that's why we say freshman year, flex the muscles. Sophomore year, build a foundation. And then once you get into junior and senior year, you're full ramp mode. Time to really crush it and get going. You know what I'm saying? Son plays basketball, best player in his high school in Boston. Need to go to some JUCO. He need to go to some JUCO. How to get a D1 or D2 community college? Again, there's a lot of things that have to be done in order to make that happen, right? I think I might have mentioned to you talent, evidence, exposure, which is exactly what I would do. Like, how are you going to get on college coaches' radar, specifically D1, D2 community colleges? Well, first of all, kid's got to be good enough to go there. Okay, let's assume that he is. Second thing is you need proof of that. You need video that shows that he can play at that level. You need stats and metrics. You need that stuff to show them. So I'd compile all of that stuff, and then you need exposure. You need those coaches to know who he is. Right now, if I asked you how many of those schools, if I said his name out loud, they'd go, yeah, we know exactly who you're talking about. If the answer is, well, probably none of them, then we got a lot of exposure work to do, right? And that's where outreach to college coaches, emails, DMs, that's where content comes into play, posting content on social media, right? That's where all of these different things come into play. But no matter what sport you play and where you're trying to get recruited, you always need talent, evidence, and exposure, which is why we just like really harp on that. Of course, that's a generic kind of strategy. It's like an overarching strategy, right? There's a ton of subcategories underneath those. How do you have good evidence, right? How do you get exposure? All those things. But like from a surface level view, that's what you're trying to get. Mama Baker. 2 Division I football players here, scholarship process, transfer portal. Is there a question there? Yeah, Mama Baker, happy to answer your question if I can get if I can get a question in there. Any tips on the sport of rowing crew? Rowing crew is interesting mostly because it's so athletic based. It's so based. Like a lot of rowing and crew teams and programs will recruit players from other sports, and they just look for like the best athletes that they can possibly find. And so for rowing and crew specifically, a lot of the other stuff that we talk about matters. Contact a lot of schools, a lot of coaches, multiple times, multiple platforms. All that stuff still applies for you. But the one thing that I would really highlight for rowing and crew is athleticism, showcasing strength as much as you possibly can. Strength, endurance, that is what they are really looking for. You could have a bunch of athletic videos that have nothing to do with rowing or crew and still get recruited for rowing and crew because they just care so much about athleticism. That's literally all it is. We've had multiple players who have never done rowing and crew in their life and are trying to get recruited for other sports, get recruited for rowing and crew just because they're good athletes. 5'11", 5'10", 5'11-ish, 14. Running back linebacker question is, should I stay at my position or should I become a lineman? I would go wherever you are going to play best. And right there, you might be too young to know the answer to that question, right? Over time, what happens is you kind of get funneled into where you're probably going to play best. If you continue growing, because you're a big kid, right? 14, 5'10", 5'11", you're a big kid. If you continue growing like that and you end up being 6'4", 6'5", and you can put on some weight, then you might end up becoming a lineman. But I think right now it's probably still too early because if you end up being 6'1", right, and you're stocky and you're strong, maybe you're even quick or something like that, that question will be a lot more that question will be easier to answer is what I'm saying. So I think you're too early to decide what position you're going to play. I would continue to engage all positions and figure out which one you end up just sort of like water, like just naturally flowing into. And then once you figure that out, I'd go all in on that one. Coaches at your school want you to become a lineman. Yeah. If you continue trending in that direction, then that's totally fine, right? Linemen still get scholarships. That's all still really good. But I would say that it's still probably too early for you to really know. Because if you don't end up being 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", you're going to have a hard time being a lineman, depending on what level you're trying to go to. Daughter's been invited on a visit. Even though the details haven't been discussed, the way the conversations sound, it's as if they expect us to drive down. Should we expect a flight covered? Is it an unofficial visit or an official visit? If it's an unofficial visit, this is very normal and very standard. If it's an official visit, it depends how far the flight is and how far the drive is, rather. If it's an unofficial visit, this is very normal. And yeah, you should be expected to drive down. If it's an official visit, it probably depends on how far it is. Like if you're having to drive 10 hours, then they should probably be booking your flight. If you have to drive 2 hours, then you should probably just be driving, right? And that's likely what they would expect. So that question probably depends on whether they are official visit. It's an official visit or an unofficial visit. Let's see. Where are we at here? Where are we at here? You guys having a good Monday? Great info. Thank you. You're welcome. Thanks for being here. This week, we'll be doing these 1 p.m. Eastern every day, Monday to Friday. Come hang out. Come ask questions. It's great to see some familiar faces in here. Love seeing familiar faces. Come hang out. How many days should you let pass before sending a follow-up email? Is there a recommended time interval? There is a recommended time interval. It depends on whether it's a school that has responded or hasn't responded, though. If it's a school that has responded, I recommend, and actually I got to be careful about how I do this. We get a bunch of recruiting services that watch these lives and then steal all our stuff. So I'll give you, if it's a school that hasn't responded, I would say the time interval should be shorter than you think. So think somewhere between 2 days and 10 days, something like that. If it's a school that has responded and they're already interested and you're continuing to build that relationship, then you can drag that out a little bit if you want. The one thing that I would really stay away from is sending a message and then waiting, 30 days or 60 days to send another one. At that point, there's no cohesive trail. A coach is going to forget. They recruit a lot of players. There's a lot going on. They're probably going to forget. So you just want to make sure that you can stay top of mind and that there's a cohesive trail happening here. Those would be the biggest things. So time intervals, something like that. It's annoying because there's stuff like I don't have really any problem just telling you like what the time interval is, except I get a bunch of recruiting services watching our crap. Son's very early in recruiting right now, sophomore. However, sport commits don't come till about 1920. So what do you do over that period of time? Meaning that is a long time. Yes, it is. What you are noticing is this sort of like new trend that's happening in recruiting, which two things are happening simultaneously. One is that college coaches are presenting offers to high school athletes later than ever. So instead of giving them right at the beginning of junior year, which was really common for a long time, now they're waiting until the middle end of junior year, the beginning of senior year, right? They're waiting longer than ever to give an offer. However, they're recruiting high school athletes earlier than ever before. So here's what that means. They want to evaluate high school athletes for a long period of time, but they don't actually give an offer until later than ever before. That's kind of what's happening, right? So it's kind of this strange thing. Now, you said, what do we do over that period of time? Good question. I have my handy dandy thing. Let me show you what happens. All right. So I've never done this before. You guys can let me know in the comments if you like when I show you like things like this. If you like that, let me know in the chat. That'd be helpful. Otherwise, I'll stop doing this and I'll just talk instead. But I feel like this would be helpful. So a lot of times, the way that this works is that you'll go like this. So you'll go from like 0 to 20 in the beginning. Okay. You're not going to get an offer right away. And so you'll send an email and a coach will express interest and you're like 20% of the way there, right? You're not 80% of the way there. You're like 20% of the way there, right? And what you're saying is, man, to go from like 0 to 100, this is taking a long time. Like it's going to take a long time. Yeah. So what do you do in between here? If a coach hasn't given you an offer yet, there's only one reason that hasn't happened, mainly. And it is that they are not 100% sure that your kid is the best option they will find. So you should, over that long period of time, continue to give them reasons that your kid is the best, option that they can find. So that means doing a couple things. One is varying the types of evidence that you send. There are 9 different types of evidence. We're not going to go through all those right now, but some of them would be video or stats or metrics or coach recommendation or awards and accomplishments. Like those are some examples. Okay. The point is that you want to share all different kinds of that evidence, right? Not just one. You want to share all different kinds. So over the course of the 2 years or however long it's going to be, you should be sharing different kinds of evidence over a long period of time and sharing a lot of them. You're going to want to share a bunch of them. So here's what's going to happen. You're at like 20, right? And then you're going to make some progress. And at some point, let's say you're going to go to like 30 and you're going to have a phone call. Okay. So you're here, you started at 0, you got a response. Great. But you're still early. They're not going to give you an offer yet. And so now you make it to like, you go 10 more steps and you're at 30 and you have your first phone call. Great. Okay. Now what? But you still don't have an offer yet. So the point is you're going to send them more follow-ups and more evidence, right? And then you're going to get to the point where you're going to have what we call in-person evaluation, right? And this would be at like 40. So you go from phone call to in-person evaluation. So now you're here, right? Awesome. Now, the time in between each of these might be a month, might be 3 months, just depends on the kid, the schools, the process, everything. Okay. But now you're here. All right, cool. Then you're continuing to send them evidence over a long period of time. And then you end up, I don't know, let's say they love you in person and you jump from like 40 to 70. Woo, right? So now you might have another phone call. Notice that it doesn't always just go in sequential order of phone call, in-person evaluation, visit, offer. That's not how it always goes. It might be phone call, in-person evaluation to another phone call, then maybe a visit here, and then they give you the offer, right? It might be something like that. And you might have 5 phone calls. You might, they might want to see you play 3 times. So there's multiple of these throughout it, but notice all of them are evaluation periods. They're simply trying to evaluate your kid further to see if they're the best option they can find. That's why. And so when you say, hey, you're early in the process, what do we do over this long time? The answer is you run the marathon. You run the marathon, which means you do ordinary actions for an extraordinary period of time. When somebody runs a marathon, what are they doing? They're putting one step in front of the other for hours. That's it. There's nothing complex about that. That's all they're doing. And they just do ordinary actions for an extraordinary period of time. That's what you do in recruiting. You're running a marathon. And so you just say, okay, we're just going to keep sending evidence. It's a slow burn. We're going to vary the types of evidence. We're going to vary the platforms. We're going to go contact more schools. We're going to get phone calls and in-person evaluations. We're going to take some visits. We're going to have more phone calls. We're going to get rejected a little bit, and then we're going to bounce back. Like, that's what you're going to be doing for the next couple of years. And so the thing that I constantly stress to our families is ordinary actions for an extraordinary period of time. Yes, we got cool tactics. We got cool stuff that we do. Like, yes, we have all that stuff. But at the end of the day, even with that stuff, the answer is ordinary actions for an extraordinary period of time. Derek says, we signed up with you all this past Friday. Excited to get to work. Man, me too. I'm pumped, Derek. Beautiful. By the way, if you're curious what he signed up for, he signed up for the Accelerator, which is like our advanced program with families. So if you're the parent of a high school athlete and you're looking for not just like the workshop, like we're hosting tomorrow, the social media workshop, which is like a set period of like 2 hours. We're just going to share everything we know about social media, and then it's over, which is great. But if you're looking for like a real solution to recruiting, then the Accelerator is probably more up your alley. d1scholarship.com/accelerator. If you're a parent and you qualify, you can schedule a call with us. We'll see where you guys are at, make sure that we can even help you. And if you are, we'll get you signed up. And if you're like, I'd rather just do a workshop, cool. Social media workshops tomorrow. Registration closes tomorrow. So now is a great time to get in. In fact, kind of like the only time to get in. So d1scholarship.com/social media workshop. Okay. Is it possible to play NAIA soccer as an international with highlights only? Yes, it is possible. Soccer recruits heavily internationally. You guys seen the articles recently about a certain team. I'm not going to name who's like 100% international recruits. That's a thing. And so soccer recruits heavily internationally. So this is not super uncommon. Highlights only, again, not super uncommon, but better if they can see you play. But it's definitely possible. The question was, is it possible? Yeah, absolutely possible. Had a meeting with Trevor. I love Trevor. Great guy. Only concern, not sure if your process work well with hockey as it seems different other sports work around recruiting standpoint. I can only go based off the other hockey players that we've had, which have worked. There haven't been a lot of them. True. We've had 2 of them that I can think of off the top of my head. It's worked well for both of them, but it's also a small sample size. So yeah, you would be taking a bit of a risk for sure. Daughter plays soccer, football in the UK at academy level, has been playing at this level since 10. She's 15 now. If she switches to a non-academy team, will this reduce her chance of D1? Maybe. Mostly just because you're talking international. And again, I'm not like a crazy international recruiting expert, so take that with a grain of salt. But it could, only, again, because you're international. If you were not international, I wouldn't have quite as many issues with it, but I think it'll definitely be easier for you guys. What time is the workshop tomorrow? Tomorrow, the workshop, social media workshop, is at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. 7:30 p.m. Eastern. All ticket purchasers will get the recording of it and the slides that I'm going to use, as well as a swipe file of 100 social media posts, bios, and pinned tweets that you can use for inspiration. So even if you can't make it live, of course, I'm always encouraging people to make it live. But even if you can't, technically, if you bought the ticket, then you can get the recording and the slides, even if you couldn't make it. But it's at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, and I highly recommend you be there live. It's always just a better, it's just a better experience live. Will it be recorded for those who can't attend at this time? Yeah. So that's the point is like, yeah, it'll be recorded for those who can't attend at that exact time. 100%. So the social media workshops tomorrow, registration closes tomorrow afternoon, d1scholarship.com/social media workshop. And I think that's it. All right. Well, as always, very fun, guys. See you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll be back again doing this. Always appreciate you guys coming. Always appreciate the questions. I hope it helps. Rob says, besides word of mouth, what can I do to help promote your business? I'm around soccer players and parents every day that have the same mindset as myself. You're extremely informative and helpful. Thanks, Rob. I appreciate the kind words. And I appreciate you asking how you can help promote it. Just share our social media stuff. You know, at the end of the day, like, I'm not here to sell anybody who's not interested. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not. I'm not here to sell somebody who's not interested. And so I would just show them the social media stuff, see if they get value from the free stuff. If they get value from the free stuff, then maybe they'll get value from the paid stuff, you know? But part of the reason that I do these lives is so like for people who are looking for advanced recruiting help, you know, if I'm in those shoes, I'm like, yeah, I want to hear a lot from the personnel and I want to hear a lot from the company. I want to make sure that they really know what they're talking about. When I do these lives, I answer questions. I don't know what people are going to ask. Like, I don't have like a sheet that I'm like, oh, this is the answer that I wrote out beforehand. We're just talking about stuff that we know. Right. And so like, that's why we do these. So encourage your friends to show up live to these lives. It'd be great. Send them to social media stuff and then let them make their decision on their own, you know? Yeah, you can tell them about our workshops. You can tell them about the accelerator. All that's great. Just wanted to let everyone know that Jack's info has been priceless. My kid received 7 D1 offers, 3 full rides. Without Jack's info, daughter wouldn't have gotten a response close to that. Man, I really appreciate you guys. You're making it sound like I'm planting comments. For real. You're making it sound like I'm planting comments, but that's incredibly nice. I appreciate you. I'm stoked for you. 7 D1 offers, 3 full rides is no joke. That's no joke. I'm pumped for you. And that's why we do it. That's why we do it. So social media workshop tomorrow, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, d1scholarship.com/social media workshop. If you want to grab a ticket, registration closes tomorrow. We won't be doing another social media workshop for a few months, probably at least. And then, of course, if you're looking for something more than that, you can check out the accelerator, d1scholarship.com/accelerator for parents. And that's where we'll be able to really like dive into your process and really watch over it. So anyway, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Appreciate you. And yeah, we'll see you back here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. 1 p.m. Eastern. Hold on one sec. Yeah. Okay. See you back here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day.